welcome to episode number 56 of The Wonder of Stuff, broadcast live on Google Hangouts on air every weekend. Well, actually, no, it's not every weekend, it's every 2 weeks nowadays. This is the place you'll find news, information, commentary, and science and engineering and technology from the past week and beyond, and anything else that interests us from inside our tiny little human brains. As ever, my name is John Gardner, and to help me out on this journey to knowledge, I've got my colleagues here, Richard Smith and Ross Davidson. Say hello, chaps.
Hello, chaps.
Okay, well, we've got a new format tonight, which is, no, let's not prepare anything and just talk about stuff. So we had a little chat midweek on IM, and Richard said, let's do some philosophical stuff about science. And what it transpires is he might have been under the influence when he said that. So I was good. Right, I've got nothing prepared. So the way we're going to do it, I think, Richard, is we're going to take a topic and just speak endlessly about stuff that we may or may not know.
Yeah, well, what we could do is we could revisit some of the contentious topics we've had before and talk more about what our thoughts are on them, rather than on the issue that we're reporting. We could just talk a little bit more about them and what our feelings are on them. So we had a lot of discussion around the quantum physics ones, in particular the one with Andy and talking about photosynthesis. So that was one. Around the one, the GM one. Can you remember we talked a bit about modifying mosquitoes and trying to kill them out by putting the duff males into the system?
Actually,
we had discussion about. We never finished about drugs, about are people on too many prescription drugs. So there was a few where we could discuss it further.
Okay,
go on then.
Let's start off with something. So we thought about exploring space as a starting point.
Yeah.
As a hop-off point, and basically, I guess, is there any point? Do we send humans up there?
Well, what inspired us this one is I was watching a debate between Lawrence Krauss and Noam Chomsky, and they were talking about space and the utility of it. And I know Krauss is someone who said before that he believes these, when it's basically the question was asked by Motherboard, I think. Is it worrying that it's in the hands of private companies? And he was saying not so much for him, because he doesn't think they'll ever get there. He thinks it'll only work when governments start taking it seriously again, going to Mars and to the moon. And that was how that conversation started, but the sort of broad topic that run through it that they didn't seem to tackle directly, which was more interesting to me, was why bother sending humans when you can get the scientific data with robots? Should we really bother sending people? Because the main cost seems to be keeping people alive over the course of the trip, doesn't it?
Yeah, I suppose that's a valid point. But I mean, what I would say is that ultimately, that there is the argument about why we exploring space when we should be dealing with stuff on this planet and that sort of thing. But I think ultimately, the sort of human race has to move off this planet in some way, shape, or form. So it sort of does make sense to keep humans as part of the equation, because you're coming across and dealing with the issues that will ultimately need to be resolved. Yes, it would be, we've already sent probes and stuff and rovers and things to Mars, but the plan is to send humans to start looking at that process of being able to survive on another planet. It's not just the scientific, chemical analysis and drilling and stuff like that. there's a bigger thing involved, which is
it's like kind of like a feasibility study.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so it's not just for getting information about detecting water. It's about testing humans on Mars as well.
See, I mean, I would immediately counteract that and say that, quite frankly, if we were really interested about moving off this planet, we would be doing things a lot quicker than we are now. Quite frankly, I think.
Well, we should be. That's the thing. But it's
the amount of people who are prodding around, going, "I'm going to go to Mars sometime." Yeah. It's just not. It basically is a complete and utter apathy within
Yeah.
It seems to me, and it's like, so I'll twist it round then. If it is such an apathetic response to impending doom, we're it really is quite basic stuff that we're doing, and it's like, and the schedules are huge, like, 20, 30 years away, 40 years away. What's the point?
Well, I mean, the point is that there are people who think it should be getting done. They're just in the minority. It's not an urgent thing to do. There isn't impending doom on the horizon that we know of. But there are people out there who still think it's a priority, so they're the people that are doing it. But I think was there not something with did Stephen Hawking not say something over the past week about this? I'm sure he was in the news about something talking about this.
Was he?
Yeah, he was saying something about either about the fact that we're being really apathetic about destroying the planet, or we're being apathetic about moving away. What amongst yourselves? I'll find out.
I think it seems to be what part of the problem is the amount of coordination it requires. So it's not like other elements of science where you can go off and do a bit of the puzzle. You can't really, like you were saying about the feasibility thing, unless you do the whole multi-billion or trillion-dollar exercise, you don't really get very far. Do you know what I mean? Having a probe go and gather some data, or having a model that accurately models the physics or whatever, is not going to really get you that. It's essential. It's the essential underpinning. But until you coordinate the piece of work of launching the vehicle and getting out there, you're not really making much progress, are you? And that's the thing that it seems to be the barrier, is the amount of coordination it requires.
Yeah, Stephen Hawking basically this week said we have less than 100 years to save the human race. That was basically what he was saying. We're entering the most dangerous 100 years in the history of the human race. And so I suppose he's probably talked about everything in terms of potential, us destroying our own planet and not moving off the planet and not looking into space and that sort of thing. So
I think probably some periods during the Cold War have arguably been worse than what we're going through at the moment. But yeah,
I still think it's pathetic though that that we're still in this sort of nation building phase, and we're still in this. You've got. I mean, I'll take an example just because it's one that everybody knows. North Korea. They are insular. They don't come into our world. You're not allowed to leave our world. Everybody's. And if this really is this issue, which is, it's unquestionable that we've only got a finite amount of time on the planet Earth, and planet Earth is going to get, we've got to get off. Little, things like this, when they go to these economic forums and these all the presidents and the prime ministers and everything, leaders of the countries get together, they shouldn't be talking about little shitty little things. They should be talking about big things.
Interesting enough, I've got a North Korea news story. Apparently, last week they announced they'd invented an alcohol that didn't give you a hangover.
I did hear that, actually. Yeah, I did hear that. What was it made of? It was made of some vegetable, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's some sort of health-giving thing. I suspect it doesn't work. But yeah, I mean,
we've talked about that. We've talked about that before, though, because the thing that gives you the hangover is I can't remember the chemical now, but the chemical that ethanol's turned into by the metabolism of it is the thing that gives you a hangover. So unless you take ethanol out, you're always going to have the hangover.
Yeah, exactly.
Or you change the metabolic process of humans. You could do that instead.
Possibly. I mean, coming back to this, the topic of looking at moving off the planet and stuff. I think we would have covered this before, in terms of just what's going to be the solution to the fact that the population is getting bigger and bigger so quickly that ultimately it's going to have to stop increasing. How does that happen? Can you see sort of is it China that had the no more than 2 children?
See, I'm not sure.
Is that feasible?
I'm not sure that I ever bought that one as such. The human population thing. I don't think that's what causes the problem. I think the thing that causes the problem is the unknown, the unexpected things that happen, like certain gases being released during the Industrial Revolution, the atomic bomb being invented, all those sorts of things pose a threat to the human race. I think the population, in terms of raw numbers, there's no reason why this planet, if we change the technology and the way we do things, this planet can, the numbers it can support is much, much higher than we are. Yeah. But you just have to innovate. Yes, of course, in terms, if you're using arable land, flat land on the ground as it stands now, and trying to raise cattle on it, it's never ever going to scale very much bigger than it is now. And in fact, we're talking about that crisis.
Exactly. Food is going to be the big problem.
Yeah.
That is it. We're producing food in not just centuries old, but sort of like millennia. We've been doing this for millennia. We haven't changed the way we're doing it. Yet everything else is changing around us. And yet we're still coming out with the same old things. We'll buy a cow, put it on a piece of field, let the cow eat grass, kill the cow.
The technological fix for that is relatively straightforward. We know the answer to that is an engineering feat now, which is, like you say, don't raise, the arable land that you grow the grain on that you feed to the cow. Don't bother with the feeding into the cow bit. Eat the grain directly, and you'll have you'll get 3 times the yield off the same thing. Now I know there's protein. You'd have to diversify the range of plants that you grow, but that is doable now, isn't it? You just grow the vats that grow corn in.
Well, that's been known. Those type of statistics have been known for years. But again, it's what people, and it's not just the average Joe in the street, because the average Joe in the street hasn't got the means to do this change, or they don't think they have the means to do this change. But collectively, they would.
Yeah.
But yeah. So
do you think, in general, what we were saying there about sort of a bit of an apathy about travelling off the planet, that sort of thing? Do you think there's a general apathy about things like other things that are like massive changes that will need to be made? Things like changing how foods.
The problems of this, right? We just take the idea of NASA, right? And the Apollo moon landings. They were canned when nobody was interested in watching them on telly anymore.
Yeah.
That was it. When they were in the first few landings, ratings were high. Government was funding NASA. Government was going like, this is good for us.
They were beating the Russians as well.
Yeah, they were beating the Russians. All great. Then it was like, then it got to 1972. Nobody's watching this. It's like, space, another space race. Nobody cares. Nobody really cares. I mean,
became routine.
Apart from us, I mean, we obviously this whole podcast would be redundant if we weren't a little bit interested in this sort of thing. But with the majority in the street, the guy who goes out, again, I'm not picking on a newspaper. It could be the Sun, it could be the Mirror, or whatever. The guy who goes and buys the Mirror and the Sun every day and goes and has reads it over lunch. He does not care one iota about whether we go into space or not.
And we never did, in the respect that you're alluding to, that the space race was motivated by completely exterior things to science and exploration, and had absolutely nothing to do with that. It was completely a rivalry between two superpowers, and that was the way to demonstrate your prowess, was that. And there's some stuff about orbital weapons and delivery systems and defense systems and some of that, I'm sure, but most of it was just a demonstration of who can get there first, shows that you're the most powerful nation, and that was the motivator, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was. And I think also that the fact that if that momentum had been kept going in the 70s after Apollo to put the research in to go to Mars, we probably would have been there by now.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind that, okay, the technology was a lot more limited back then, but we got to the moon and we haven't been back to the moon, so
yeah, because it was because it was almost a token gesture, wasn't it? It wasn't really about scientifically you wouldn't achieve much by putting men on Mars, other than the whole thing that Ross has said earlier about the feasibility of migrating fully into space or partially into space. That's the only thing you would achieve.
But you would still, in the 70s, you would still got the the one up against the Russians.
Do you not feel that over recent years there has been a lot more interest in science, in terms of we do have more popular science programs on telly that people do get into, and people, the person on the street is watching and is interested. I do feel that's happening more and more these days.
There's counter examples though, isn't there? There's the whole GOP movement in America where there was that whole phase going back 15, the last 15 years up until a couple of years ago of evolution being contested in schools, and so there's forward steps, but then you have backward steps. You have sort of parties taking power in Afghanistan who are sort of anti-reason almost. You know what I mean? Ideas from the 16th century that everyone else still uses. They're anti that. So there's, yes, I suppose in Britain, but elsewhere you're seeing movements in the opposite direction, aren't you?
Yeah. And also, on the odd occasion that it's reported now on mainstream news, for instance, taking the SpaceX launch, they launched a new satellite for climate change, and the fact that was successful, nobody talked about that on mainstream media. They talked about the rocket that came back down and the leg broke and it fell and crashed and exploded. And they knew this was going to be a long shot this time because it was landing on a pontoon and the weather was dreadful and it was basically going like that. But that's what we get.
Yeah. There was another one recently.
When things go wrong, or things are do I get a high definition photograph of that space probe? Do I get a high definition photograph streaming media of this? They don't care about the background to it unless they can say, "Ooh, look, it's like a film."
Yeah, but it needs to have something to get people interested. But I think the fact that it's being reported is good.
You see, I have to say, I never thought that the Rosetta thing would have got so much interest. That, to me, I was like, it's not something that I would have immediately. I mean, I would have been interested in it, but it's not something I thought everybody else would be interested in because it's on a comet.
Well, I tell you, actually, that brings up an interesting point. I've noticed a few times. I'll give you an example. I'm very interested in watching Aurora. Aurora Borealis.
Yeah.
And obviously up here in the deepest, darkest Northumberland,
you get quite a lot.
If it's strong, you can actually see it.
Yeah.
So I've got an app on my phone that basically it monitors. I think it's Lancashire University or someone have a.
That's the Aurora Watch one, isn't
it? Yeah, Aurora Watch. They email you if there's activity. So if there's activity, I occasionally post to Facebook. I might go up my camera, that sort of thing. And when was it? It was a few weeks ago. It was on the news that there was Aurora seen around. And I looked at I didn't actually get an alert that night, and I looked at the whole sort of history, and it was no stronger than like a normal incident. Like it wasn't.
Why was that one picked up?
Yeah, so I think a lot of this sort of stuff that gets picked up just happens to be because someone just happens to report it, and then it sort of snowballs and becomes a news story. So I think something like the Rosetta one, I suppose that was quite interesting in terms of they were landing the probe. But in terms of why was it a big news story?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It was interesting, but it wasn't. It wasn't like if we land this probe, then we open the gateway to the new world. Exactly. Nothing like that. It was just.
There has been
quite
an
cool
increase.
thing to do.
There has been an increase in interest in space recently. There's definitely that's perceptible, isn't it? The last few years, there's definitely been more interest in space. The amount of programs and.
I think it's a good thing because. I mean, I've noticed I have people who know that I'm into science and stuff like that. I've had people who I've known for years come up to me in the pub and ask me about stuff who I'd never thought would be even remotely interested. And obviously it's because they've seen something on BBC or something.
Yeah.
But I think that's quite good that people who would never have had an interest before get an interest sort of triggered by something being on Brian Cox talking about it, or it being on the BBC, or being in a magazine or something.
So do you think the reason why more people are, the perception is more people are interested in it, is it because it could be something as simple as Brian Cox, because he's jovial, he's all over the place.
There's about to be something called the Brian Cox effect.
The Brian Cox effect, yes, the coefficient of Cox. So is it something like that? Is it are we? Is it something that's going on in the schools? Is it?
I think it's the Mars thing's kicked it off. To be honest, as much as it's probably not going to happen, I think it's the Mars one and all that sort of thing.
Really? Do you honestly? Well, I mean, it could be, but I just didn't. I thought that everybody thought it was just it's just like more pie in the sky stuff.
I don't think the public think that. No, I think the public think it's on the horizon.
Yeah, I think if you ask the general public, they probably think it was a lot more likely than it actually is, that it's going to happen in the next, I don't know, what was the plan? There was an American plan or something for the next...
for below 20 years, which is just...
Yeah, something like that. But I'll tell you what, I think if it does happen, it will be absolutely huge. Not just from obviously from a purely scientific point of view, I think it would be huge, but I think it would be one of these sort of global events that would be streamed 24 hours a day, and everybody would be watching, and you know what I mean?
It'd be the Truman Show.
It would be made into such a huge thing.
In reality,
pay-per-view and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, but in reality, the challenge is that if Krauss is right and that it really takes a concerted effort by a government or governments, I don't know that we're heading into a particularly good era for that, because I was saying in predictions, I don't know if I said this about India, but it looks like India is not going to be the superpower that everyone thought. Yeah. And because India would have, in this respect, would have been a good power, a good country to come into a superpower position, because they did have a space program, they were interested in doing that, and China, from what I can tell, would only do it for the wrong reasons, not for the right reasons.
Well, China seemed to be doing it as what America and Russia were doing it back in the '60s, which is like just to put the Chinese flag on X.
A show of force sort of thing.
Yeah. When really, and there was there was all the BRIC countries, wasn't there? Originally, obviously Russia are fairly fundamental to the whole ISS thing and getting people up and down there now, even though they're managing to put aside what the Americans and the Russians are talking about. They don't like each other very much. Mm-hmm. But that little bit of Kazakhstan is managing to put aside all of this, which is great. But you're right. India have a space program. They're certainly releasing satellites. Brazil was another one. They had a space program. I haven't heard anything about their space program.
I think both of their economic performances have been underwhelming. So you're not really going to see the level of prosperity going into those. Those countries might go into a decline even, or at least. I think Brazil's its growth's still very good, but it's nowhere near the size of India, is it?
No.
So in terms of what you mentioned before about it being sort of like a private enterprise, in terms of sort of like the cost of a Mars mission, I don't know what it would be, but it would be within the realm of a company like a Google or something, wouldn't it? Because Google, I'm sure this week became the biggest company in the world or something.
I think Krauss's take on it is, not sorry to keep referencing the same one person, but he's talked about it, which it's not an area where a lot of scientists do talk about it, because you're getting into quite a lot of conjecture and speculation, and it's just his opinion really, but based on the fact that he's a nuclear scientist he's one of the greatest living ones alive, so he talks about it with some authority, I suppose, but he just believes that the cost in terms of risk to life and stuff, the litigation around it, and
right, yeah,
and basically that economically really there's nothing to get back from it. He doesn't really see even the largest of financial companies being in a position to do it. You would really need.
It's not worth the risk. It's not.
Yeah, you need a subsidised program, don't you? Really. You need someone who's willing to shelve the cost of it.
Well, that's the thing. Because that's interesting in terms of the sort of risk and stuff. Yeah, everyone when they've been talking about the Mars missions and stuff have said it's either a known suicide mission because you're only going to get there and you're not going to come back. And even if they found some way that it wasn't guaranteed that you weren't going to come back, it would be very highly likely that you wouldn't. That's the sort of thing that only a government could get people to sign up to. You couldn't sign up to something with a private company that said that. They wouldn't be allowed to, would they?
Well,
how did the Mars One stuff do it then?
Don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
Mars One's a private.
well, litigation would have, stuff would have to change because
Yeah.
I mean, you can have people working for private security firms that take on similar risks to the military, can't you? And
I suppose so. Yeah.
you could have something that the public or people in the field could say this is a suicide mission, and yet as a private contractor, you could still presumably put yourself in that position legally.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Would it not be just similar to that if you've got the appetite for the risk?
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, and if you think, just dangerous jobs in general, there is a risk
Or
that's an accepted risk.
Extreme sport type
Yeah,
situations, I suppose.
So anyway, they reckon it's going to be $100 billion to send somebody.
100 billion.
Yeah.
And Google are worth what, 500 billion or something?
Yeah.
So it's even too big for them, isn't it?
It's
Really?
a fair old chunk of.
Well, I don't think Google would be big enough to free up that amount of revenue to put towards something, would they? They wouldn't be able to free up that 100
They
billion.
could put adverts on the side of the fact.
So So perhaps Mars is a little bit too far away at the moment, but there's been a lot of talk about us going back to the moon from a number of occasions.
They know there's water ice on the moon, don't they?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
So there's still that whole idea that the moon may be a base for producing fuel for a trip to Mars anyway. So I've always assumed that would be involved.
So what's the point of sending another person to the moon?
Well, because isn't the moon the makeup of the moon structurally in terms of the dust and everything, isn't that very similar to Mars?
Oh, you mean just as a testing it out with a person type? Yeah, but surely you could get a robot to apply this pressure here and.
Yeah, but the thing is, the thing with Mars is, if it's going to be feasible, they've got to build things with what they've got on Mars.
Yeah. They've got to test that whole idea of sending something up there to pre-construct something that then is suitable for a human.
Just like a sand pit, basically.
I've
always assumed it would be a stopping-off point anyway, in some shape or form.
But why though? Because I mean, it's not going to cut down the distance any great deal.
No, but I mean, there's that whole thing of, I'm sure there's a thing about, it's all to do with how much energy is involved in getting stuff off the surface of the Earth.
Yeah.
Is massive compared to how much. Compared to how much to get off the moon. You're saying that
basically, if they could get up to the moon, build an outpost on the moon with fuel supplies, refuel,
possibly start constructing part of the ship on the moon.
Yeah, because you only need
launch it.
Yeah, you only need something to shuttle you from. So the thing that uses a lot of solid rocket booster is just to get you from Earth to the moon, and then you've got your craft that does the 3-year leg or whatever it is from
Yeah.
So do we see then that the moon is the next step? They'll still be sending robots to Mars, but have we got everything we can from a robot? Can a robot give us anything else?
I'm struggling to see now with robots the way they are of what a human could do other than the sort of things where you're saying, let's see the psychological impact, let's see how practical it is, blah blah blah. But even the practical things, if you are careful enough with your planning of sending the robot, you should be able to accurately map that out, shouldn't you?
I mean, I suppose one big issue of stuff on Mars is that because of the distance, there's no sort of real-time communication. So if you control the robot in real time with a human and do stuff on Mars, I imagine you'd be able to do everything just as productively as a human on there. But
it takes about 13 to 14 minutes to get a radio signal out.
So if you think of how long it would take to, I don't know, construct something on Mars, if every step you had to wait 26 minutes to see if the last
but you can still
worked.
Presumably you can still build in a routine that you execute the routine. You don't, you know what I mean?
You could, but I think obviously having a human there would make everything a lot more efficient. Not saying that they'd be able to do more. You know what I mean? So I don't know.
I mean, routines are great if you've got like nice clean surfaces.
No
But it's
variables and
all you
stuff.
need is to go for it to go down a ditch and not be able to get back up. When
But
basically,
presumably that's all very, very well mapped out at this point, is it not? I mean, surely they know to a square foot by now, don't they?
No, the one, the resolution of the orbiters and stuff will be meters, I would have thought.
Right, but I mean, yeah. You're not
yeah,
going to
meter.
you're not going to end up in a crater that you didn't know was there, though, are you?
No, but I mean the rovers that they've got up there have got stuck several times. You know, one of those two, Opportunity and the other
Yeah,
one.
one of them
One of them
never
got
got out.
stuck and then died, didn't it? And one of them was stuck for like 3 months before they managed to work out the combination of wheel turns to actually get it freed.
I think we should go, but I think the reason to go for me is to capture the human imagination and to push the effort further on. I think scientifically, I just cannot see the logic.
Yeah, I think I'd agree on that. Scientifically, what you're going to discover about Mars that you couldn't do with a robot, probably nothing. It'll be what you can discover about humans.
Yeah.
That you'll find out.
But then, if you can't, to me, if you can't sort of predetermine what you're going to go and find out, so if it's basically that chaotic that you need to send a person to establish it, I think you send a separate set of people, and you'll have a totally different circumstance. Because if it really is that chaotic that you sort of can't interrogate it remotely, I think it's not going to be that predictive sending a bunch of people anyway, because you send the next bunch of people, and if it's that different, it's gonna be a totally different outcome with a different set of people.
Well, exactly. You'll have a set of one results, won't you? Which is no use. Yeah, true. Mm-hmm. Do you think it'll happen within our lifetime?
I think it's 50-50 within my lifetime.
Yeah, John.
Not my lifetime. It won't. I'm pretty much guaranteed. There's not the cohesiveness between countries, and there isn't, and the way that the government's change in America, which is, I have to say, is is the main superpower in terms of getting space flight. I can't see it. I just can't see it. There's just not the will to do it.
Unless some commercial factor emerges,
That is true.
Talk about these like bodies in space that are made of precious metal, and perhaps they could be harvested and all that. I know even that sounds a bit science fiction at the moment, but if something like that comes within the reach of a company, so say you had a company worth 500 billion, and a project like that was 10 billion, but you could potentially get trillion returns, then maybe in that situation you could see if Mars happens to by some way be a staging for that, then you could see it maybe happening in that situation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I could see us going back to the moon in my lifetime. But Mars, I think I'd probably go with you and say 50-50. Probably less, actually, if I'm being honest.
I think it's one of those things with a long-term prediction. It's just kind of put finger in the air, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Unless there's some big asteroid that starts heading to us.
Well, you see, there was I was watching Stargazing live when it was on that week earlier in January, and there were there's a couple of asteroids that have gone past us, but they've come in at such an angle where we haven't been able to see them.
Coming straight for us.
Until it's very late. I mean, the trajectory was well away, but we've got like certain black spots which I didn't realise. If they're coming in at the wrong angle, we can't see them until it's like, quite frankly, a little bit too late. What you need is Bruce Willis, obviously. Get himself up there.
Yeah.
Well, because my eldest's obsessed with the dinosaur thing and the asteroid asteroid that wiped out them. It's quite frightening how much damage such a small thing, but moving at such a fast speed, could do to a planet. That's the thing. It doesn't even need to be a particularly large one.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they were seeing the one that actually came in at an angle. Originally, they said Dora said, so it would come in and wipe out a city, and actually it would probably wipe out a continent.
Have you seen the sort of computer simulations that people have made of like an asteroid hitting the Earth?
No.
They're quite. You sort of see it, and it obviously the destruction goes out, and then it just eventually envelops the entire globe.
Well, it doesn't even have to hit though, does it? Because if it passes close enough, it just destroys all the atmosphere.
Rips off the atmosphere.
So it doesn't even have to hit you; it just has to come close.
Yeah.
But yeah, anything that's capable of destroying a city in the sense of physically vaporizing a city is gonna probably kill all humans on the planet, because you're talking about something with a velocity or mass or momentum capable of changing weather permanently. So it's a bit like when we talked about Yellowstone, isn't it? The super volcano. If the localized effect is that severe, the long-term sort of effect on weather and ocean current and all sorts of things. Ocean current only needs to go out by a few degrees of whatever, and everything's fucked, isn't it?
Yeah. And then we'll quickly have to find a planet.
Yeah, but it's one of those things where the engineering project is so complicated and so unknown. We just don't know how long. If we decided as a human race, to come together and work on it tomorrow, we still don't know that it's doable in a couple of years. It might be, well, here's a bit of a tangent on the science sort of. I was listening to something the other day that was sort of explaining about science and how we thought we knew everything, and then the more we inspected it, the less we realized we knew, and then actually we suddenly realized, Jesus, we know literally nothing about this. This is a million times more complicated than we ever thought, and it may be beyond us to ever understand it. And we don't with projects like that of relocating the human race, there may be hurdles in that project that simply are beyond us, no matter what the time constraint is.
Yeah,
because it's just unknown, isn't it?
That idea of like us knowing everything there is to know has happened several times in history, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And then and you look back at those times now and think, well, that was stupid them thinking that. But then you think, we sort of think that now, we know pretty much about most about everything, but we blatantly won't do.
Well, I think now though, maybe not in the public, but I think now in the scientific community, what we know is we've got very simplistic models that do a very good job of prediction, but we have a lot of uncertainty about what that really tells us. And I think the scientific community now knows that across the board. So there's been also, but even since then, I suppose there's been endeavours like animal behaviour and stuff like that, where the whole thing's just been ripped out again. It's like, no, they don't. That whole thing about the mechanistic, and then we realise actually there's nothing that we can use to predict mathematically how ecosystems are going to behave.
Yeah.
And then you get things like this week where the ninth planet.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up at some point. That's an interesting one, actually. I meant to read about that, and I saw it in the news several places. What exactly was that about?
Well, the thing is beyond Pluto.
Yeah.
The thing is there's another planet, but they can't visually see it. They just know about the effects of the orbits.
I think have we covered this before about Pluto not being a planet?
Oh no, well no, we know that Pluto was downgraded to a dwarf planet.
And that's because there's things that they know of already that are bigger than it.
Yes, yeah.
So,
but this is another planet.
They found that's even bigger.
This is if Pluto was still a planet, this would be the 10th planet in our.
Yeah.
And they've observed asteroids and various space things that are in elliptical orbits around this unseen mass. So they're mathematically predicting that there's something here.
Have they called it? What's that name? Nibiru or something?
No, they've called it Planet X. It's called it Planet X or Planet 9 or something. Basically they're waiting for. Well, they can't name it because they haven't actually.
That's made me just realise something. That whole story about Planet X. That's because it would have been named that because it was Planet 10. I've never thought that.
Yeah, I remember doing Planet X in school.
I thought it was just X because it doesn't have a name.
You know why OS X is called OS?
Yeah, it just never struck me. Here's an interesting thing that we can just have a look at. On that article that I just found about Hawking, there's a question. Let me just share my screen. So here's the survey. Will humans be responsible for our own downfall? What do we think? Yes or no?
I think you've got a fair old chance that there's something human-based. It's the start of the end. So yeah, I would say yes. Go on.
Yeah, Richard.
I think it's a tricky one. I think during the Cold War we're so close that you sort of think we haven't moved on. Like, we're not much more mature than that now, so it wouldn't take a lot to have that situation occur again. So in that sense, we're real risks in the immediate term are ourselves. But then, we've discussed that Yellowstone supervolcano. If that goes off, it's nothing to do with us really, and that could be it as well, couldn't it? So I don't know. It's a difficult one.
But the Yellowstone, they have closed the roads, so we'll be all right.
Yeah.
So if I say yes here, what do we think the general consensus will be?
I reckon it'll be 80% or above.
On yes?
Yeah.
91%. So yeah, most people think we're going to knack ourselves.
But I think that's probably...
But the bizarre thing is that we don't seem to be doing anything to help ourselves out.
I think that's the raised consciousness in the last 10 years in particular about global warming, though. That seems to be a thing that has been around for a long time, but is only really... Like, I remember people talking about it when I was at Castlemorpeth, so that would be before I joined, so 2005 and stuff, and the majority of people I spoke to at the time didn't believe it in this country, and these are like intelligent people, didn't believe it. So I think we've come a long way from then, where now it's laughable not to believe it, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think the fact that said 91%, it just smacks of some fatalistic thing that's going on in the world, where people are like, we're all going to fuck ourselves up.
Have you seen?
There's nothing we can do about it.
Well, you were talking about apathy before, and I think have you seen anything by Adam Curtis on this sort of thing about? Well, all watched over by Machines of Love and Grace. You should check that out. I mean, he talks about science, scientific discoveries and stuff like that, but he just talks about a general apathy that seems to have hit now everyone, and you see it in voter apathy, and you can't influence. We've realised that actually we don't have that big of a stuff just happens, and we don't have that big of a say, and that has generated a lot of apathy. But I don't know. It's kind of like a gambler's fallacy almost, isn't it? That even a lot of people don't seem to get the thing of, like, even if you can only influence 0.1% of a thing, that is often the tipping point. So that can be enough to make the difference. So yes, you can't control it, but you can, a slight influence can make a big difference. And climate change is one of those where yes, there's nothing you can do as an individual, but if we start to wise up to it, we don't know right now how far we are from making it irreversible, but it could be that 2016 is the year where we take an action that results in a timeline where the planet's saved, or we take another route and the planet isn't saved. We could really be on that timeline right now, couldn't we? And the apathy doesn't help.
Are we gonna finish on something positive?
Yeah, let's finish on something positive.
I haven't got anything positive.
Oh, right. Well, no, basically, everybody's fatalistic, everybody's apathetic. We've got no chance of going to Mars. We might go to the moon again, and then the planet's just going to die.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think the apathy thing, though, is just, it ties back into what we've just been talking about, though, of like how much uncertainty there is. I think it is a rational response to that, isn't it? I think if you were fine with things, I think you're not getting it. You're not understanding it because it's not fine. so I think it is a completely rational response, isn't it?
That sounds exactly like Niels Bohr. He said that about quantum theory. He said if you think you understand it, you don't understand it. Well, on that note, on that bombshell, well, basically, if you've enjoyed, actually, I've had a really good good time in that 45 minutes there.
And to think the jumping off question of why send humans to space when we can send robots, we really never actually got off that on anything else.
So we can last one subtopic lasts 45 minutes.
I don't think we'd even exhausted that, to be fair.
No, I don't think because we didn't get to an answer, did we?
Yeah.
So what I'm going to say to you is, if you're watching this, and it would be great if you could subscribe to this now, because I put this on Facebook. Because it affects the more subscriptions we get, it affects our rankings in YouTube. So it'd be brilliant if you could just, even if you're never going to watch us again, just subscribe to us, please. But yeah, do you like this type of format of sort of like, because to be honest, I'm enjoying this type of thing more than I was with just subjects and answers. But it'd be interesting to know if anybody else who watches this would agree with us. So send it in, wonderofstuff@gmail.com. Whoa, hang on. Whoa, there you go. That's the email address, or you can go to wonderstuff.com and connect to us from there. Yeah, so there you go. Hope you've enjoyed it. We have.
We have, yeah.
We have. There you go. Well, that's the important thing. As long as we've enjoyed it. So until episode 57, which is in 2 weeks' time, obviously we're going on a bi-weekly stint now. You've got 2 weeks to watch this again, come up with some insanely inquisitive questions first, and get them into us.
And we just need one.
Yeah, we just need one. Yeah, two. If you had like 5 questions, good God, we'd never go to work again. We'd just sit here, have our own little scummy little T-shirts.
Well, start paying us for this, and we won't go to work.
Yes. We could do 24-hour. That's what we could do. Anyway, no, God, that would be terrible. Right, okay. Until next 2 weeks' time. Thanks for watching, and if you're on the podcast, thanks for listening. Okay, bye-bye now, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.